Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the National
Nice to
Source of
see you.
Energy. Coming back from a break, and we are jumping in with H 231. Which is a technical corrections bill for Fish and Wildlife, and we're joined by Ms. Smith. From Fish and Wildlife General Counsel. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. For the record, my name is Anna Smith. I'm General Counsel for Fish and Wildlife. And the bill 231 that you have before you is a relatively short bill dealing with truly housekeeping matters that the department felt were time sensitive. And I can go quickly section by section. I also would like to address in the bill that you have, section 4 is marked as deleted. It was removed by the House, and I was explaining the discussion there and the language that the department would like to introduce as section 4.
Just.
Yes, go ahead.
Sure, are we still working on the bill that has?
Yes. Okay. So the first section, this is a revision to 10 VSA 4001, beginning on page 1, line 5. The two definitions that the department is proposing to strike are unnecessary and outdated definitions of certain fish species. One of the primary concerns is the way that these definitions are inconsistent with contemporary regulations over the management of these species. The primary example here is that the definition of this outdated definition of pickerel that's in statute includes muskie. A pickerel in statute can actually be shot and speared. Muskie cannot be taken. They're now a rare fish where there's a 0 bag limit. And so just generally speaking, these definitions are unnecessary. All of the fish species are managed in section 122, the fish management rule. If there are no questions, section 2
Well,
is.
can I ask?
Yeah, sure.
But without seeing that, I can pull it up on but without seeing the full list of definitions, these aren't actually definitions, they're just a list of the words.
Right.
What comes before this?
I don't know exactly what comes before pickerel. There is another, I believe there's another fish definition after something. And
Species of genus.
right, pickerel, in fact, these are all, they're the same genus, but then they're different species within the genus. They're very weird definitions, frankly.
Okay.
There are, I think there's one other definition on this list, and I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me, of another fish species. It might be. Can I keep a little head that's on there? But then otherwise, this list of definitions doesn't contain anything that defines wildlife species. So these are kind of odd ones out.
Okay. Oh, these are part of.
This is this is section 4 definition, so it's all the fish and wildlife definitions.
Okay.
Sorry.
They're just a list, they're not actually definitions, they're just a list of fish.
Mhm.
Okay.
Right, it doesn't define them by their species characteristics or anything.
Okay. All right.
It's more of a social categorization, but is not necessary at this point.
Okay.
Section 2 is an amendment to 10 VSA 4905. The statute currently allows that when necessary to protect buildings, bird nests can be taken. The language we've added, consistent with the Federal Migratory Bird Treaty Act, states that the nests have to be no longer in use, essentially inactive nests. It's just to clarify that any nest cannot be taken at any time. The definitions, the bird species definitions were also just updated here. Again, my understanding, this was work that the definitions were updated by Roz through is our wildlife diversity program chair, but apparently the English sparrow, starling, and purple grackle are inaccurate, again, names for these birds that are no longer protected. Section 3 is the longest section here. And this is revisions to 10 VSA 4502. This is specifically the language that assigns points to fish and wildlife violations. The accumulation of a certain number of points results in license suspension or revocation. And so the default is 5 points, and then section 4502 walks through those violations that constitute 10-point violations and 20-point violations. It looks like a lot of tweaks, but all it is right sizing the statute to the reference in the rule. So the rules have been updated, these sections in the rules have changed. We're just updating this to reflect the correct section that refers to the violation in the statute. The one substantive change in here is that snaring animals is going from a 10-point to a 20-point violation. So you'll see that on page 5, line 8. For this reference to snaring animals is now in the section.
Wait, a 20-point or 10?
20-point.
Okay.
It was 10, now
What's the difference between snaring and trapping?
snaring uses a snare. It's a specific implement.
Snare.
My very general understanding, yeah, is it trap?
It's a cable.
Yeah.
beam, and
Okay,
they put it on a beam trail, the animal walks through it and gets hung up. They usually choke themselves to death.
Okay, cradle root system, okay.
And it's prohibited.
Okay,
It's not an implement that's allowed up to traffic roll.
and it's now worth 20.
Right.
Okay, so.
So you would lose your license automatically.
It would be revoked, and I should know this off the top of my head, the number of years, I believe it's a 5-year suspension. But I will.
20 points puts you into the bad person.
Is 20 points the threshold for losing your license, or what's that threshold?
This is when it would be great to have Colonel Stedman.
Oh, that's okay, we're hoping to have him in later, so we can
Yeah.
ask him that, so that's fine.
I think, I don't wanna speak out of turn, I can,
No worries.
I can look back to it exactly.
It's all good.
And then section 4, this is line 5, or sorry, page 5, line 10 is deleted, I'll circle back to that. Section 5, this is an amendment to 2 different sections of statute that's intended to reestablish the Judicial Bureau's jurisdiction over violations of the use of public waters rules. So in 2015, there was an amendment to this language in Title 23, and it struck through a specific reference to the Judicial Bureau's jurisdiction over these violations. Last summer, when the department we will go in regularly to establish the fines associated with Judicial Bureau violations. So these are civil tickets that are issued for things like use of public waters rules, regulates using a motor boat on certain bodies of water. Wardens and any other state trooper, Marine Division can issue a ticket for those. We went in to update the fines, and they told us that they didn't have jurisdiction because of this language tweak in 2015. We are just making a minor amendment to Title 23, Section 3317. And for VSA 1102, which refers specifically to the jurisdiction of the Judicial Bureau. So reestablishing that they have jurisdiction over violations of rules adopted under 10 VSA 1424, which is the use of public waters rules. This will just allow us the law enforcement to continue to issue civil tickets for these violations.
Okay. Yes, question.
I don't know if you all know this, but does public waters have a different definition than waters in the state? We had a lot of conversations in here about waters.
Yeah, well, the only difference, waters of the state encompasses everything. There are certain, there are private ponds, which are defined in statute, it's a contained pond, water entirely surrounded by land that you own, and
Okay,
there's no inlet or outlet.
so you can do what,
That's it.
more or less what you want there,
You can restrict public access to that body of water.
okay,
Yes, it's a pretty limited definition.
got it, so public waters is just lakes, ponds, streams, those things that there's public access to.
Correct.
So it's narrower than the definition of waters of the state, but
That's
it's
correct, yes.
still pretty broad,
Mhm.
okay.
Okay,
So
that's going.
that's the gist.
Okay.
Section 4 was a revision to 10 VSA 4705, which is related to shooting from a motor vehicle or aircraft. And I,
You said section 4, is that what you meant?
Yes, we're going back.
You're going back.
yeah,
Yes.
sorry, it was, so we,
So delete it.
it was deleted by the House. And what we proposed was a change to 4705. But right now, the way that the statute's written, you cannot have a loaded long gun in a weapon. And these are rifles and shotguns. It doesn't apply to handguns, and that was always very specific. We wanted to also add language that prohibited you from having a crossbow that was cocked, because people are hunting with crossbows. And that was really the purpose. There was a lot of discussion on the House floor around language that we introduced originally that referred to, I believe it was rifles, shotguns, or other implements. The reference was intended to be to crossbows, air guns, or arrow guns. We did not intend it to apply to handguns. So there was a discussion about, infringement of the constitutional carry. So we revised that language. And our intention is really only to clarify that in addition to unloaded long guns, you also cannot have a cocked crossbow, air rifle, or arrow rifle. So I've added, I know that Ledge Council didn't draft this, I did print copies, if folks wanna look at the agency or the department's language, as proposed. It's highlighted, but not in colors. Yeah,
I guess my question, where or when aren't you allowed to have roads?
when you're in your vehicle in the right
We're
way.
one.
Any place you can't,
Okay,
No.
Alright.
any place you can't have a long gun or a shotgun.
okay, I'm in a vehicle.
Because those are just as accurate and shoot just as far.
You can't have them loaded.
Loaded, correct, you can have it in your
Vehicle.
vehicle, right, but you cannot have a,
That's said.
the long gun or the implement that you're using to hunt cannot be ready to discharge. While you're in the vehicle in the right way.
In the right of way, so
Once
you
you
could be, on a dirt road, or is that, what is the right of way?
within the right of way of a public highway, and public highway, this is line 10 of page 1. And that's the existing language. And public highway is defined in Title 6. I can also come back to that language, but if you're on private property, this restriction doesn't apply.
What about like a class 4?
That's still a public highway.
That is still
that
a
is
public highway, so it
designated
doesn't
public
mean
highway.
just like Route 7.
Right, it
It has a
doesn't-
broad definition of that.
Right, it doesn't mean highways, there are some more contemporary breakdowns of state highways, federal highways in Title 6, but this is any publicly laid out, publicly established right of way.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you could do it in your own driveway, or
Yeah, you're on
your own field or something, okay.
The right of way often extends beyond, like, past the edges of the road to some degree.
Right.
Right, yeah,
It's
We use for the center line.
Yeah. yes, go ahead.
So the muzzle muzzling shotgun or rifle, if he disarmed, the primer cap needs to be removed. The projectile can be, and the powder can be in the barrel. And a lot of your air rifles and shotguns have a propellant charge. If that is removed,
So I worked on this language with Colonel Stedman, and the way that we drafted it, this is on line 11 here.
Yeah.
So a rifle And the new, underline, new language is underlined, air rifle, arrow rifle, or pre-charged pneumatic rifle. Containing a loaded cartridge or shell in the chamber mechanism or magazine of the. I think this is where I think, if the colonel's able to come in, speak more. With more expertise to this, but when we drafted this, the intention was to capture how these implements would be ready to discharge. Muzzle loaders were already in here, so section 2, that language was already in the statute around charged with counter projectile and the ignition system has been enabled.
So the way I read this is that,
It explains it.
yeah,
Okay,
yes, yes, yeah.
This might be just, I don't know if you know this, but curious that the pre-charged pneumatic rifle is capitalized from the P.
I think that was just the
Is that-
exacting.
Oh, okay, so that's, it's not like a,
It's
you know,
not a
T
term
F
of art.
yeah.
No, and I assume that will be corrected by village council.
Yeah, that's-
Versus cabinet.
Yeah, no worries. And so the rest of that language there is,
We wanted to define exactly what we were talking about with regard to air rifles, and pneumatic rifles, so it was clear that this was not applying to handguns. Just those hunting implements. We also, the other language that's added here is on page 2, my line numbers are wrong, I apologize. But the crossbow, so unless it's uncocked, person shall not possess or transport a crossbow in a motor vehicle, except it was permitted under. That should also be correct.
I'm going on a snowmobile with a cocked crossbow, that's so dangerous.
The
And you
surprise was
shoot yourself, my God.
No. Can you send that to me electronically at some point?
Yes.
Okay.
This all makes sense.
okay,
Yeah,
It makes, we'll see what comes in, but
and the rest is just, looks like it's just
It's the rest of the
grammatical,
section, yeah.
gendered language.
Yes.
Okay,
so can we expect to see a revised, no?
well, I wanted to check in first, but my sense is that if, because I mean, it does have to do with guns, right? And that can be a tricky topic. And I, you know, fully get that.
I suppose
You support it. Okay.
they did a good job, you know, they kept away from intent.
Mhm,
Well, technical
mhm.
requirements are, and
Okay, in that case, it's my inclination anyway to include this in the next draft.
Okay.
For 231.
I will send it to Jude, and Michael, okay.
Okay, great.
While I'm here, I don't, this wasn't in the bill on the committee's webpage, but. I was informed that there was some discussion around 1454, and I don't know if that's come up for inclusion in this bill. This is related to decontamination.
Oh, okay, I raised this. Well, just to have everybody be in.
yeah,
There was a concern around decontaminating of boats as they change lakes, I suppose. So a greeter might be there to say, hey, looks like, I need to do an inspection. And as a result of the inspection, they may say, okay, you need to go decontaminate your boat and we have a facility to do that. Please do that. But there's concern that in the statute, there's not language to say, and if you don't comply with an inspection, or if you, don't decontaminate when instructed to do so, then you shouldn't go in the waters, you shall not go in the water. And so there was, I had some conversation with folks and ran it up the flagpole with Julie Moore to say, is this language that we could conceivably add to this bill? To just, I was thinking of it as like closing the loop to make it clear that if you don't do these things, you can't go in the water. But it sounded like, at least the last I understood was that she was gonna do some more, just checking in to understand the problem that was being, trying to solve, but if there was anything further you wanted to say about that, it's welcome.
Sure, the feedback that I heard both from Fish and Wildlife staff and DEC staff was that there may be a narrower way to close that loop. The language regarding compliance with decontamination check stations and the folks that are working there is in the statute currently. And I think that perhaps simpler language that effectively was just added to that subsection C to say, you know, if the following conditions apply, you shall decontaminate before entering the water. It would be a more directed way to do that.
Mhm.
The concern that I heard from DEC is that they're currently going through a stakeholder process to look at decontamination and how that can be done effectively.
Mhm.
And so their inclination is to gather that information and work with stakeholders before adding additional language to statute.
Do you have a sense of when that stakeholder process might conclude or have some recommendations?
I know that it's ongoing, they've had at least one meeting, and I can get back to you, I'll talk to, Kim Jensen and Jenny, who is the manager of the Lakes and Ponds program, and I can bring it back today.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
Yeah.
Did you have some?
Just like there, in my district, there are two major lakes, the only one that has a decontamination system, so.
Mhm.
So it comes down to enforcement issues, so if we're gonna be talking about enforcement, somebody's gonna have to provide funding to make sure that, and the readers are all volunteer,
Right,
so.
right. So they really cannot have.
Well, they can call
enforcement
the word,
authority. Right.
you know, and they can enforce it,
Mhm.
so it's an important issue.
Yeah, especially as we're seeing that invasive species are spreading, so. Yeah, okay,
I'll send
thank you.
Yeah, I'll send you the information from the state group, and I'll follow up also about the revocation points necessary for revocation of your license.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, and so just to have a little discussion about this bill. I know we're not in markup yet, but did anyone have things that they either want to flag or change or think they might want to alter about this so far? If not, because this bill feels pretty straightforward to me.
Yeah.
I would like to get some more testimony on this air rifle language. Yeah,
Yeah, but this is minor, but one thing that I, with the crossbow. Why would we even have an arrow in the crossbow, let alone have a cock? So I don't know why, there's a reason.
You take it for a room in your vehicle.
So,
yeah,
because the analogy would be that you can have your gun loaded, but not cocked. And which is not legal, so why would it be legal to have an arrow in the crossbow and the issue? Can you ask that question, set them up? Yeah, set them up for that, because,
You have to, first of all, you have to have, you can't have an arrow in it to cock it. So their purpose is that if it's cocked, then all they have to do is they see game on the side of the road.
oh, I know,
They can just pull an arrow, stick it in the crowd and shoot it. It's an enforcement issue. It's more, you know, and fish and wildlife.
yeah, but
But you can't cock it unless you're outside.
Yeah, no, but I'm with you.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe, okay, you can't cock it, but unless you're outside anyway, if it's that.
You'd be standing up,
Well, plus,
It's
take both hands,
So
both feet to do it.
okay, so maybe that's a little, maybe that, I thought maybe you.
wouldn't it also, I mean, I've seen crossbows, I've never used one, but it seems to me that there would also be a risk of it as you're transporting it, of it dry firing. And then that's really bad
I had
for,
a friend of mine had that happen to him.
did it break?
He was assembling it and it caught him.
Yeah, it's not a good thing.
Yeah,
It's
it'll
dangerous, dangerous anyway to be.
in the car,
In the car.
yeah,
Attention.
it's a safety issue. Okay. So we'll see if we can get some more testimony on that, but otherwise this feels pretty cut and dry to me. And-
Okay, so looking at the definitions now, it makes more sense. They're weird though, no other part of statute just has a word and then a hyphen, and then this is what the definition is.
I think they were,
That I know of anyway.
a lot of these were adopted originally in the sixties before there were a whole slate of fish and wildlife regulations, so everything was done in statute. I mean, the statute had to be updated annually for like deer season number.
Yeah, I heard about the fights, they used to like on the house floor have a fight about when deer season was gonna be.
Mhm.
So there was a lot of language in there that's probably currently outdated, but
Yeah, I mean, it's like commissioner hyphen, commissioner of fish and wildlife, like in other parts of the statute,
Yeah.
there's like it's written out what the
Right.
definition is, it's just
She'll
so
be able to
weird.
refer to.
Yeah,
So actually, just to follow up on that, because we're removing pickerel and pike perch as definitions effectively, we don't need to redefine a smaller subcategory of species elsewhere.
no, I mean, the way that the species are managed is all outlined in the section 122 of the rules of the fish management rule.
Okay.
And beyond that, there's no need to have statutory definitions for certain genus or species of fish.
Okay. So removing it here doesn't.
Doesn't eliminate it from the archives.
Right.
All of these, the way that pickerel and perch are managed, and their bag limits and the any closures for those specific species are captured in the regulations. So that's section 122 of the appendix to Title 10, where all fish and wildlife regs live.
Mhm. Okay.
And as Senator Hardy pointed out, it's not actually a definition, so it doesn't
Yeah.
create any
like
way
your-
to categorize those things, yeah.
Okay. Great, thank you. Any other questions at this point, any other thoughts on parts of this bill? Okay,
Adding that section back in it's good.
okay,
Goes us.
great, super,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and so we don't have.
Michael was not available.
Yeah, until 11, okay, so this is one of these like having big gaps kind of day.